Hi, today I'm going to be doing a get ready with me using my Project Pan 26 products, and I'm going to be explaining my No by 26 and why I started doing this project. So I'm Lauren, I'm a PhD chemist, and this past year is the first time that I have had real disposable income. So that, in combination with a love for makeup and a determination to stress buy as a coping mechanism, has meant that my collection has grown past what I am comfortable with. So I wanted to go ahead and use this as my accountability project and say that this year is more about accountability and not restriction. I'm calling this No Buy 2026, but it's actually going to be a structural no buy with low buy guardrail rules. And that is because what I'm hoping to see is more of a behavioral change and not perfection. Okay, so I'm going to get started with my priming step. So I want to talk specifically about why I'm doing this. So I'm not doing a No by 2026 because buying makeup is bad. I'm personally doing a No by 2026 because my collection was starting to get too overwhelming for my space. And even though I have never been put in debt for makeup or purchasing makeup, I do find that there are other better things that I could be doing with the money that I am using on makeup at the moment, such as vacations or, trips, all those other different things that are better geared toward a more fuller life rather than having a full makeup room that I can go to. So one of the things that I did find over the past year was that I was personally using makeup to cope with a lot of the stress in my life. So anything from how the world was behaving to how my work was going to just day-to-day irritations, I would typically turn to shopping as a coping mechanism, and that turned into a bit of an addiction for me because it was more about the dopamine rush than it was about the actual products that I was buying. So that is what I'm hoping to curb starting in 2026. So to start, I'm just going to use the Laneige lip sleeving mask. So this is just something that I can put on my lips and can hydrate while we go through the rest of this video. Okay, so the next step in my routine is going to be a primer, and I'm going to use the Glow Recipe Primer. And so while I am putting this on, I want to talk about a few things. So specifically when I say no buy 2026, I don't mean an unrealistic, zero flexibility no buy. That would not do well for me personally. As I said, I have spent quite a bit over the past year or so with using this makeup to cope. And so a strict no buy would not go well. I do have guardrails put in place. So these are the rules and exceptions, and anything I do must fit strictly within the rules and the exceptions that I'm going to outline here. The default of this project is going to be no purchasing, and as I said, any exceptions to that rule must meet the strict criteria that I'm outlining here, and if it doesn't, I will come in front of the camera, I will let you know, and I fully hope that you hold me accountable, because that is the reason why I am putting this all on video this year, is I need some sort of accountability in my No by 2026. Next, we'll go on to the base steps. So I'm going to start with the KVD primer that is in my Project Pan 26. And while I apply this and then the House Labs foundation, which is also in my Project Pan 26, I want to talk through specifically the rules that I'm going to hold myself accountable to for this next year. So again, the very first rule being the default is no new makeup no new skincare. So essentially, that means that nothing new coming in to my project or my collection this year, and only using what I currently have as a way to gauge whether I like it, whether it fits my needs, things of that nature. The next rule of my No by 2026 is going to be that there should be no backups. That means even if it is a favorite product and it is going out of being discontinued, it doesn't need to be a backup. There's always more that can be bought. There's always new products coming online. And that also means that if something is on sale, if something is, being advertised highly, something like that, I do not need backups. So at the end of the month, I will be doing a makeup collection inventory. And you'll see that my one exception for this rule is if I don't have something to fit in that category. So if I were to run out of concealers, for say, then I would need to go pick up a new concealer. But as you'll see in my video at the end of the month, there is no category that I could run out of this year, at least not in makeup. I may have a few hair care products. I'm trying to think of a skincare category, but I'm pretty sure I have enough in the skincare as well. With the one exception being, I do think I am going to run out of a retinol before the end of the year, but we'll discuss that later. So again, my second rule, no backups. The third rule that I'm going to have for myself is no browsing as entertainment. So essentially what I have found is that a lot of my stress spending accumulated from me coming home after work and then sitting on the couch and browsing Instagram or watching YouTube videos talking about the newest releases or things of that nature. They tend to cause me to buy new things. So I'm going to try to ignore those types of entertainment. I'm going to be trying to stay off of Instagram as much as possible because that was a big place where I just kind of fell and did a lot of shopping because they will tell you about sales. And in my mind, if I'm getting it cheaper, it's for a deal. So therefore I need to have it. And again, as I said from the video you'll see at the end of the month, there was really nothing that I needed to have. My collection was complete before that. So those are the three main rules that I'm setting for my No by 2026. On to the next step that I typically do, which is all of my cheek products. So going to be starting with the Westman Atelier Contour. And I just do this on my nose and on the underside of my chin. So starting now, you should see a graphic pop up on the screen, and that is going to be the slide for all of my exceptions in the Project Pan 26. So to start off with, for my No by 26, again, just going to reiterate that the default is not to buy any new makeup, skincare, hair care, everything that falls within that category that I have currently enough of. Now, what you will see on the slide is there are going to be a few exceptions to those rules. So the first exception being prepaid subscriptions. So back in the summer of last year, I felt that it was worthwhile to get an annual subscription to both FabFitFun and Allure. I wanted to be as transparent as possible and let you know that there are in fact new things that are going to be coming into my collection, even though I'm on this No by 2026. And again, that's because that's a sunk cost that I've already spent. I can't get it back. So I will be updating you on any of those products that come in. So those will be in my quarterly empties and declutter video. So I'll show you anything that came in, and at that time we can discuss about whether I keep them, give them away, whatever ends up happening to them. So next I'm going to use my Charlotte Tilbury bronzer, and I'm gonna add that to my face. So going over the next exception on my list is that replacements are only allowed when that category has been completely used up. So as I said before, if I were to run out of, for example, retinol this year, then I will allow myself to buy a new retinol to replace something. But if it's a category that has something that can be used in that category still, there's no allowance for any replacements. Something else that I want to keep in mind is just because I am decluttering things this year, so like I said, you'll see that in my quarterly declutter videos, that does not automatically mean that I can go out and buy things to replace the things that I am decluttering. So that is something that I have done in the past, where I have purposely decluttered some of my items that were not as beneficial in my routine, and then I immediately use that as an excuse to go out and buy things to replace those items. I do not want to do that in the future. I'm hoping to, again, curate my collection and make it smaller. So therefore, a declutter does not equal an automatic replacement. I do want to say that next month is my birthday. I do currently have some gift cards that I received for Christmas, and I imagine that I'll be getting more for my birthday as well. So I do plan on purchasing a few items with those gift cards during the month of February. Again, they will be things that have been sitting on a wish list, things that I have been thinking about, particularly the retinol, as I know I'll run out before the end of this year. So that's one of the things that I put on the list that I'm gonna need. But it needs to be intentional purchases and not just a normal everyday, we're just gonna buy makeup for the fun of it. So I'm trying to curb that and make it more of a intentional purpose that is a treat rather than something that is done as a normal everyday activity. The final exception in my rules as it stands right now is I am planning for one window where I will allow myself to purchase. So that's gonna be during Black Friday. Again, I don't want to give myself zero flexibility because for me personally, that will not go well. I will immediately start thinking about coulda, woulda, shoulda. If I had it, life would be so much better, so on and so forth. So I kind of want to give myself a bit of a breather, a bit of an out by saying that I will allow for one window in Black Friday timeframe, and then obviously, like I mentioned before, if I do have gift cards, I will allow myself to spend those as well. But going into it for Black Friday, I will set up strict rules, so we can talk about that later as we get closer, but I will have a budget going into it that I will not be allowed to go above. It will be everything that is on a wish list. Again, no impulse purchases. And it will be things that I hope you guys can hold me accountable for afterwards. Moving on to the eye step, I'm gonna start with the Notoriously Morbid Single Shadow. So while I put this on, I want to just continue down the path that I was talking about before. So essentially another type of exception that I will allow is if the formula has gone off. So if it's something that is causing me irritation, smells bad, is not working for my skin type, so on and so forth, I will allow myself to declutter it at that time. I'm not hate panning anything. That's not my journey. As you'll see from my collection video at the end of the month, I have quite enough to not be forced to hate pan. So that is something that I will not be doing. I'm just gonna go ahead and use this Patrick Ta palette and buff out the edges of this since it is a bit dark around the edges for me. So the other thing that I want to essentially own up to and have more accountability for is I have an inherent problem with calling a want a need. So again, a lot of what I ended up buying over the past year, I justified by saying, oh, I need it. I need the newest, X, Y, and Z, the newest palette, the newest launch for foundation. Blush was a big one last year. So I need the new formula of every blush that is coming on the market. And turns out it's not a need. I had plenty of blushes in my collection before those. It was, in fact, just a want. So that is something that I need to learn to distinguish as we move forward is personally, I need to know the difference between a want and a need and how I can restrict myself to only actually accumulating all of the needs, and then wants can be more of a treat or something that is earned rather than, again, just an everyday spending necessity. Okay, so next I'm going to move on to the Blink liquid liner. I am not good enough to do this on camera, so I'm gonna do this really fast and then I'll come back after it's done. I went ahead and put my eyeliner, some mascara, and my brows on because it's easier for me to do those off camera. We're gonna move on to lips. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with the Buxom lip liner, which is in my project Pan 26. So that is the Buxom lip liner. As you can see, there's not a huge difference between that and the color of my lips, but it does give a little bit of definition to the outside of my lip line. And then I'll use the Kulfi staining lip oil next. But first I wanted to talk a little bit about the decluttering. So I'm trying to make sure to frame decluttering as not a failure. What I'm decluttering from my collection is ultimately not me failing at panning things or finishing things or so on and so forth. It's me determining with real world use that it no longer works for my collection. So again, as someone in science, I tend to thrive with data and numbers and graphs and things, which you'll see during my makeup inventories and declutters and things of that nature. Graphics is something I really enjoy, but having data that shows me in real world use that it doesn't work for the way that I do my makeup, or the color is off, it doesn't match me, it's gone bad, it's causing irritation, so on and so forth. To me, that will be a declutter moving forward. And again, I just want to make sure that's framed not as a failure, but as data that I can use to curate my collection and make sure I don't make those same mistakes in the future once I do allow myself to start bringing more things into my collection. For example, one thing that I am now learning as I'm using this Kulfi lip stain oil more and more is that it is not my favorite product. So it is very oily to the point that it tends to get outside of my lip lines, even if I am wearing a liner like the Buxom one that's in my project. Luckily, the oil does tend to go away pretty quickly and it leaves behind a pretty decent stain, but it is definitely not something that I will or foresee myself continuing to buy in the future, mostly just because I just opened that one and lo and behold, I do have a backup for a product that I had never used before because I determined that I needed not one, but two of them. So welcome to the reason that we're going to be on this journey this year, is to curb some of those habits because I had never even used it before whenever I bought the second one. So it's part of the reason why we're trying to curate my collection. On to the final step of my routine, which is all of the setting that I need to do. So we're going to start with the Ofra setting powder that I got in a mystery box. So starting off, you should see the slide come back up on the screen. And with the slide, what you will see is the other half filled in now. So that half talks about the accountability part of the project that I'm using. So for those are going to be what I am using to hold myself accountable for this next year. So the first one is obviously the products that I'm using today. So that is my Project Pan 26 products. So for those, I'm hoping to do full pan goal usages. So that means everything being used to completion and being able to get it out of my collection. So again, the things that I'm putting in here are old, or they're things that I have not used for one reason or another for a long period of time. So therefore, they just need to be used up or ultimately decluttered from my collection, whatever ends up being the best scenario moving forward. Secondly, the way that I want to be held accountable for this is going to be deck of panning. So again, if you're not familiar, it is a project started by Emily and Max, a YouTuber that has been doing it for a few years. I've been watching influencers do it for quite a while, and I think it'll really help because I tend to have a problem with getting bored after I use the same products day after day after day. So Project Pan 26 will be beneficial for getting things out of my collection, but I need to have something that I could do as more of a usage goal project. So that is what Deck of Panning is. It is more of a usage goal every month, and it's updated on the 20th of every month between now and December. So you should be seeing those videos typically the third week of the month as they go up, and we can use parts of my collection that are not getting touched because I am just focusing on the Project Pan 26 parts. Gonna go ahead and spray my face really fast, and then we'll get to the final accountability tool that I am using. And for setting spray, I'm using the Urban Decay All-Nighter that is in my project. And then also I did put on the What's Up Beauty highlighter as well, because I typically use that after I set with powder. The final accountability tool that I want to use is my quarterly declutters and empties. So as that says, I'll be updating 4 times a year, so once a quarter, and that's where I will show you everything that I have emptied in that quarter, not just in makeup, but across skincare, hair care, everything. And then I will also show you the products that I determined no longer are working in my collection, so whether through Deck of Panning, Project Pan, or just everyday usage, the things that are no longer working for me. So I want to be transparent about decluttering things for my collection as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, anything that I do bring in new to my collection via a gift card or the 2 prepaid subscriptions that I have, I want to show you that as well. So that way you are aware that there are in fact new things coming into my projects for 2026, and we can discuss further how to use them during that update. But ultimately, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that this isn't just about willpower for me. It's about systems that can make my whole No by 2026 visible. So like I said, I want to make sure that there's no out that I can kind of escape from and go back down the rabbit hole of stress buying and consumerism and everything else this year. So that is the reason why I started putting these videos up on the internet, is just to be able to hold myself accountable. This is the final look using all of my Project Pan 26 items. So I just want to close up and reiterate that No by 2026 isn't about deprivation. It's about understanding my habits now that I have disposable income. So I'll be documenting everything, as I mentioned, through this Project Pan 26 monthly updates, as well as Deck of Panning monthly updates and quarterly empties. So if you are also trying to curb your spending in 2026 through a no buy, low buy, however you want to phrase it, I would love to have you along for the ride. And again, if you are doing a no buy or a low buy for this year, if you want to talk about your rules down below, I would love to hear how you are setting up and outlining yours just to get suggestions moving forward. But again, my name is Lauren. I thank you for being here, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks.